we're never going to build them again. We don't have the money, the economics, the quarries even to try and build like that anymore. And so if you lost some of these buildings, what you'd have in its place is you'd have like probably a really nice concrete structure. Maybe it would have some interesting architectural features. But for me, part of the romanticism, I think, with these structures is looking at those old stone walls. Rebecca Napolitano, Associate Professor of Architectural Engineering. Europe is full of historic architecture. And so no matter where you go in Europe, you're going to end up running into something that's at least from the 17th century. It's very different than when you're in the United States. And so these wildfires, there's some in France, there's some in Spain. I think there have been a couple of them popping up in Greece now. And they're just manifesting with all of the heat and the droughts that have come with the late July, early August weather. And so, yeah, they're mostly happening right now in rural areas. And so it's a lot of open spaces with a lot of field brush debris. But they haven't really made it to what you would think about for a historic downtown Spain, historic downtown Madrid yet. Not to say that there aren't historic buildings in those rural areas or those rural provinces. There have been several that have been hit, but it's just it's a different building density, I would say. You cannot make a new historic building. And so one of the issues is just how can we make sure that these buildings are as safe as possible while we make sure that people are also as safe as possible. You don't want to go and send people into harm's way to make sure that your building is going to be standing after the fire. Life safety always comes first. If we lose these buildings, what you think about going on vacation in Europe wouldn't look the same if we had lost all of those buildings. And it's just part of an identity. It's part of their culture. And these, again, are things that you can't remake. You can make a fake old building, but you know it's a little bit different. You can't make a new old building. There are different vulnerabilities for different types of construction. And so say you're looking at a wildfire that's going through an area that's all like American residential construction. It's lightweight timber. That's going to burn up really quickly. There's nothing in there that really stops the fire. It's just more and more kind of fodder for the fire. When you're looking at these densely packed historic masonry towns, the physics is different. You, instead of having that really quick mobilization of the fire, you end up with more of a delay on how that heat gets through. Have you ever been to like a historic building or an old church and been in there on like a summer day and you're like, oh, it's so nice and cool in here? The principles for why it's cool inside that building are the same for why the heat doesn't make as big of an issue for those historic buildings. The heat kind of gets into the walls, and instead of just transmitting, it's kind of diffusing into the walls itself. That being said, only works for masonry. You do still have timber elements to these structures. You have roofs, you have floors, and those elements are still going to be vulnerable. But those core masonry walls, there's a lot of those that could be totally fine, still standing after a wildfire. I'm an engineer. One of the things that I love thinking about is just how's the building working. And so for me, looking at a steel, concrete building, there's a lot of secrets hidden in it. And what I like about the historic buildings is there's a lot that's just kind of at face value. And so as an engineer, I think there's something romantic to just looking at the stones and knowing this is what's carrying the load. But also just as a person who is looking at a landscape, the more rich textures that you can get, the colors, I think those are all things that kind of make the urban streetscape of Europe what it is. It makes it what you spend thousands of dollars to go on a trip to go see. And if you replaced all of that with a concrete jungle, you might not be looking anything different than maybe one of your local downtown strip malls. I'd say one of the greatest misconceptions that I work every day to try and change is that these old buildings are the most vulnerable ones out there, and they're the ones that are going to make us less resilient in the future. I don't think that's true. And I think that there are enough case studies around the world to point to that. Sure, there are always cases of these buildings falling down in an earthquake. But if you look at Mexico City, or if you look at some of the recent Venezuela earthquakes, there were also modern buildings that went down there too. And so I think building this stigma around older is more vulnerable is really dangerous, because it gives a piece for other people to come in there and start to say, well, maybe we should get rid of those buildings. Maybe we should redevelop the areas. And you're never going to have the same communities. You're never going to have that same feel if you get rid of those buildings.